Here's an example of a retro modded PC. When I say retro modded, well, you'll find out throughout this video here. I've had this case for about a year now, this computer. It's a Gateway 2000 tower. It is also the rare floor standing tower. You don't see these very often anymore nowadays. Originally, this computer, from what I can tell on the FCC ID on the back of this, is that it was a 486, although I don't know the speed of it. I'm guessing it was either a 33 or a 66. The sticker on the top is missing, which would normally go right here to tell us what speed it is. This computer has been modified since it was built by Gateway in 1995, according to the date codes on the case. As you can see, we've got a removable hard drive tray right here. This has a floppy drive right here, which I put this in here because this space was open. I think there was a SCSI CD-ROM originally in here, and I needed it for another project. A 6X DVD creative drive, very nice, had been put in here. It still has the original Gateway floppy drive in it. Come down here to the power button. You can see that the power button is red. It's not a switch anymore. It's just a momentary button now. Come to the back side of this computer. You'll see more evidence on the back as to what's been done with this thing. Power supply has a clear blue LED fan on it. We've also got a ATX motherboard right here. So you can see that it's an older board because we've only got 2 USB ports on it. And the case has been cut out very nicely, I'll say, to accommodate this. We've got our video card, and we've got our SCSI card, and we've got a network card right here. Now, this particular computer, I believe, was being used as a server at some point. Right here we've got the manufacturing date right here of 2/28/1995, and we've got the FCC ID right here. Let me zoom in a little bit on that here. I get the right button on the camera, and we can see that this was it says BAT, which means this is a baby AT form factor motherboard, 486 P3T. Now, it doesn't say necessarily in that FCC ID what the clock speed was. Obviously, anyway, it doesn't tell us that. So I'm guessing that the 3 was DX33. Not really sure on that, because in 1995, that would have been a pretty slow 486 in 1995. So I'm not sure about that. My guess is this was a DX266 machine. That's what makes sense to me, being 1995 build date. But as you can see, this case has suffered a little bit of water damage. It was left outside for a period of time. We got a little bit of rust right here and on this screw hole down here, and there's also quite a bit of dirt in this case, which has fallen out. The I/O ports back here have a little bit of weathering on them too. But everything does still work on this case. We got a little bit of rust going on the screws right here. So I don't know how long this sat outside, but we've definitely got a few rust issues with the case that can be easily taken care of. Another one right there. Basically anywhere that there was bare metal, steel going on there, it rusted. And more of that rust can be seen right here on the screws on the power supply. Right up here. So what do you think is in this case? Well, it could be a Pentium 2, could be a Pentium 3, could be a Athlon, given the fact that we've got the colored ports back here. So what could possibly be inside of this computer? Well, to find out, we just got to take the cover off this thing and reveal the interesting guts of this computer. So we've got 2 SCSI drives right here. They're both 9.1 gig, I think. They are rated. But this computer has a Matrox G45 video card in it right here. SCSI controller. And peeking right behind this cross brace right here is an AMD Athlon Slot A processor. Get you a better shot of that processor right there. This is the non-Thunderbird version, unfortunately, but it is an 800 megahertz processor, so it's not too shabby. Those are still good chips, despite the fact the cache is running pretty slow by comparison to the older, slower speed Athlons. And this does have a BioStar motherboard in it, which I had to replace the CMOS battery on for obvious reasons, because it's quite old now, and it was quite dead. We've got a case fan on the front right here, and none of the fans are noisy, actually, which is kind of surprising given how old this thing is. And we do have a SCSI cable running up to here, which I just left because I pulled that drive out. There might have been a tape backup in there, actually. I don't remember now what was in there. It's been a while since I tore this thing apart. We've got an Inspire 450 watt power supply. It's been installed in this computer. And it does have 512 megabytes of RAM, with one slot being unoccupied. Let me see if I can get the cables out of the way there. You can see that right there, all 512 megabytes of RAM right there in the first two slots. So now, of course, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to fire this beast up, which I've already done several times, so I know it works. Can you guess what operating system is on this computer? Given the fact that it's a Slot A Athlon, I don't really need the network cable because it's not doing any good anyway, but we'll just plug it in anyway. Could be Windows 98, could be Windows 2000, could be XP. Could even be Windows 7. Not going to be Windows 8, that's for sure. Well, you'll get to find out here in just a second when I get this all plugged up. And I'll tell you right now, give you a hint, the operating system does not recognize a serial mouse installed, which is kind of interesting. It should, but it doesn't. Alright, here goes nothing. There are both those SCSI hard drives coming to life there. Pause this boot up here, the post. Okay, so you can see we've got this BioStar motherboard's pretty nice. Displays the current voltages and temperatures of the processor and motherboard on startup, which is really cool. I like that. We've got our typical award BIOS setup here, Athlon 800 MHz, 512 megabytes of RAM. So we'll just go into the BIOS here. Now it's a pretty plain Jane BIOS, nothing too fancy. See the PC status, health status right there. And we can change the post time there. It's already on the longest. I'm surprised it doesn't last longer than that. See, it's recognizing the 1 gigabyte hard drive I've got currently installed in that removable drive bay there. Like I said, this is a very simplistic BIOS. There's nothing really special going on in here that we can tweak. And these are the optimal settings, default optimal settings for the BIOS. I should change that to AGP, but it doesn't really matter. So yeah, there's really nothing in the BIOS to see. So it's kind of a mediocre BIOS, but it's got a cool hardware monitor that shows up when it's on during post here. So what operating system do you think is on this computer? Well, another hint, it ain't Microsoft. Go through the wonderful SCSI BIOS detection here. Yeah, 9 gig hard drive. No, those are 80 gig hard drives, aren't they? Doesn't matter. And yes, folks, we have Linux installed on this computer. This is going to take a little bit of time to boot up. This is actually Mandriva Linux 2007 that's installed on this computer. And this was an operating system that this guy that had this computer had on all of his computers. He's a big-time Linux geek. Loved Linux. So while this is waiting to boot up here, I've got a story to tell about how I came to be with this computer and a little bit about the guy, if you're interested. If not, you can skip past this part. So this is an older gentleman. His name is Jerry, and he did some networking on the side, took care of a few people, like, you know, just kind of a small little business thing. I don't know if it was really a business, but he just took care of a few people on the side for a little extra money. And he was kind of like me in the sense that he tweaked and fiddled and, you know, whatever with computers. He just loved to fiddle with this stuff. As I found out when I went to his house about a year ago, he had his upper bedroom there on his house, just like mine, with computers all around there and parts, and he liked to tinker with and fiddle with and all that stuff. Well, the guy had a stroke, and that's why I ended up going to his house, because I had to help him figure out how to use his computers again. I don't know whatever happened to him after that. I haven't heard, but it's kind of sad, actually, because he didn't really forget everything, but he just forgot how to use a computer. He remembered using the computer, he remembered what things looked like, but he couldn't even remember how to turn it on or what the mouse was or anything. Basically, all of his knowledge got zapped in that stroke, which was really sad, actually. But this client that I took over for him, just a little lawyer firm, and mostly dealing with family, you know, divorce and whatever, and he had them all set up with everything was Linux except there was one Windows 2000 computer, and there's one server that was running Windows 2000 Server Edition, and he was very anti-Microsoft. And this was about 3 years ago, so Server 2000 and Windows 2000 on a workstation up until, you know, 2013, I guess it was, when we took that account over. You know, got to give Microsoft Windows 2000 a lot of credit for running that long. So he built all the computers that they had, the server, stuff like that, and this was one of the computers, one of the many computers that he had built, and I think he was using this as a server. I don't know if he was using this in his house or using it as a backup machine or what. But every computer that he has, or had, including the ones that they were using in the office, were all Mandriva 2007. Some of them were 2008. But that was his go-getter OS for them, and everything else he had. And he used the same username and password on all of them, which was Jerry and Sam as the password. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I fiddled around, kind of upgraded the computers a little bit. They were badly out of date. I ended up using Linux Mint, which if I was to go back again and do it, I wouldn't use Linux Mint, because that Linux Mint turned out to be a pain in the ass. But they've actually been the least issued, or the most, I don't know what you call it. I haven't had as many problems with them as I do with other people. Very rarely do they call and have issues. So I guess it's working pretty good for the most part. But all of his computers were like this, and every one of them that I saw, except for the ones that they were using over there, actually, it was like they had never been used. They were just identical clones of one another. And I know he had a lot of backup machines for them, so in case one of them failed or he had to take one in, you know, he could just give them a backup machine and get, you know, keep them up and running. But every one of his computers was like they'd never been used, including this one. And he used the BioStar motherboards on most of them. He was almost all, I think all the computers he built were AMD to some extent. This one's being the oldest one I've seen. AMD Slot A Athlon. I've gotten some Socket 462 stuff from him. Some early Duron 900s, I think they are, which are parted out now. But I got a whole crap load of computers from him last year, and this computer was one of them. motherboards that I used for the AMD Athlon 64 video, those were motherboards that he spec'd for those machines, built into those machines. Those were boards that I pulled out of those computers that I got from him, so that's where those came from. Alright, we're finally booted up. So we're going to go to Jerry. Now, yeah. Now this is not the root account. Unfortunately, I don't know the root password. I know I used the same root password on all of them, and I knew it at one point, but I've forgotten it since now. Or since then, I should say. So, and this computer is exactly as the way I found it. Spring 2007 version. Some of his computers had multiple versions of Mandriva on them, which was kind of fun. Going through them, trying to get data off of some of them. It was like, okay, which operating system was the one that was most used? But this is it. And every machine that he has looks exactly like this, where the icons are, everything. It was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. He had to have cloned them all. He set it up and then just cloned it. Every one of them he just cloned. And there's nothing installed on this machine. We got Conqueror for the browser, multimedia. There's nothing there really. Configuration, we got the normal configuration stuff there, but you know, there's really nothing on here. It's pretty well cleaned out, pretty simplistic installation. Oops, that's not what I wanted. And using the Matrox card for these older versions of Linux back in the day made a lot of sense, since they had really excellent OpenGL performance and driver support. So it makes sense to use Matrox cards in this era for Linux. This is running the Iron Gate chipset. And the South Bridge is the 756. So this isn't one of those hybrid motherboards where you had the Iron Gate North Bridge and the VS686A South Bridge. This is a true, pure AMD chipset motherboard. I like how the South Bridge is named Viper. I definitely approve of that name. I've never actually heard of it being called Viper before, so that's kind of new to me right there. Learn something new every day. You got the G450, which is labeled on the card as a plus 45, so dual head. I don't know if this is a 32 or 64 meg card. It's got to be a 64 meg card. I'm not sure. I mean, you've got more than 32 meg right here. Not by much, but processor pretty basic there. AMD Athlon, 512K of cache. FPU exception. Don't have any bugs there, thankfully, I guess. Although a bugged processor would make it unique, and I do like bugged processors. $9150. I thought that was a 9.1 gig SCSI. I think it is a 9.1 gig SCSI. And there's really not a whole lot to see here. But hey, you get a vintage sleeper PC with a vintage, well, not really vintage, I guess, kind of an old, outdated operating system installed into a case that was even older. But, you know, nowadays this would be, you know, a vintage sleeper PC Retro PC, Retromod PC, putting a new motherboard in an ancient old case. You know, but something like this, I mean, this case was only 4 years old at the time that the Slot A Athlon came out. So, you know, back then it was just you know, just reusing what you got already. And this is a nice big case. But to go from a 486 to an Athlon 800 megahertz processor is, you know, that's a big difference there, you know, performance. It's a good thing the case is built as strongly as it is, otherwise it would have just tore itself to pieces with all that new speed. So 3 ideas that I have for this case. One is I could either just leave this computer as it is, and it'd be perfectly fine. Maybe tweak it a little bit, but other than that, you could leave it the way that it is. But this case, I'm pretty sure, should fit the dual Pentium Pro Micronics motherboard that I've got. And yes, I did get heat sinks for that board. And so that's what my current direction for this case is going to be. The other option I have, and I did think about this, was to restore this back to a 46. I do have 2 Gateway Intel chipset based 46 boards that do have date code stickers on them that are very close to the date code on this case. So it basically would be a true restoration of the computer at that point. Now I might do that, I don't know. What's kind of interesting about these cases, and the Gateway case itself, they did this with, when they changed the style of this monstrosity case on the front, is that on the back side here, where the I/O shield, as we would call it nowadays, is at, this right here, this is actually a removable plate. So it just unscrews from right here. And Gateway designed these cases to be either AT or ATX. And depending on, you know, if it was an AT or an ATX motherboard that was being installed in it, they would use a different shield back here. Now this one was cut out, obviously, and that's probably why it's so clean, because the guy just removed this to cut it out. But this is kind of an interesting transitional case. And the other style of Gateway case, well, the front's a little bit different, but it's basically the same case, is the exact same way. This is a plate they just moved. So it's one of those things. 1995, 1996, Gateway knew that ATX was just around the corner, and so they designed this case to work with either style. Not to mention, we've also got the mounting holes on the back right here to accommodate both styles of motherboard, which is not uncommon in these big cases. My other giant tower case can also fit either style as well, despite the fact that the back plate is not something that's removable. It would have to be cut out, but it's Baby AT and ATX share a lot of the same mounting holes, so it's pretty easy to retrofit to work with either MATX or full ATX, depending on the size of the case. But yeah, we got a fan back there too. But yeah, none of these fans are loud, which is kind of surprising. Loudest thing are those 2 SCSI hard drives right there. But yeah, I don't know for sure what I'm going to do with this computer, but more than likely I'm going to be using it for the dual Pentium Pro build, at least just to get that up and running. I will save the parts from this, obviously, because there's no reason to junk them. BioStar motherboard is probably not going to be my favorite board, even though it does have the temperature monitor during post, which is really cool. But without BIOS options to tweak, it's kind of mediocre in that sense. But probably doesn't really matter. I've got other Athlon motherboards as well, so it's not a it's probably not a motherboard I'll use on a regular basis, but it will be good for an interesting face-off video between different Slot A motherboards, that's for sure, since I've got, you know, that would make it 4th one I've got now. So alright guys, this has been the video of the very interesting retro modded PC. Taking brand new components, putting in a 486 case, And those components are now vintage as well. Alright guys, talk to you later. See you again on the Wayback Tech channel. Peace out everybody.